Welcome to the UnStruktured podcast. In this two-part episode, I talk with trend researcher and strategist Tsveti Enlow. After opening the first youth hostel in Bulgaria at the age of 19, a few years after the fall of communism, Tsveti went on to study international business in the United States and become an expert in identifying trends and connections across art, business, and culture. Tsveti and I talk about her consistent path of creating her own roles, becoming a trend strategist and how that role is changing, and the need for self-care in a career that runs 24/7. I'm Michelle Rose, and this is UnStruktured. This episode was brought to you by Struktur Society, the community for creators in art, design, and music. For almost a decade, Struktur has brought together creatives from across the industrial, apparel, graphic, and sound design industries, building professional relationships, creating a platform for knowledge sharing, and raising the bar of product creation. From live events and workshops to publication and podcasting, Struktur continues to evolve to build the strong creator community needed to craft our future. Find us at struktursociety.com and subscribe to our Substack at struktursociety.substack.com. When I was preparing for this interview, I was thinking about, I was trying to remember how we met, because we've known each other for many years now. And I knew that I had met you at Struktur event at the conference. And I was trying to think, was it the first one? Was it the second?
It was the first one.
And I was pretty sure it was the first one because you were working for Icebreaker. And Icebreaker, the wool company, was one of the first sponsors. And it was because I had previously worked with Kurt Foster. He was a designer and merchandiser at Columbia Sportswear. And so he brought Icebreaker on, and which was one of my favorite brands. And so Icebreaker was a big part of the event, and you were there.
Yeah. And Kurt, it's we were on the same team, and he's a very dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
Even to this day.
So that was about 10 years ago, almost 10 years. It was 9 years. 9 years ago. So, and I remember you being there, and then somehow we connected up later on, and now we're just connected. So I don't know how we connected again, if you went to other events or...
I went to all of them.
Okay. So you know the path, and you know the whole path of the Struktur.
Yeah. I made a point to show up and attend. But, it was a very special time. Because, right now there's so many things going on and so many events, but back then there was just nothing like this. And what felt different about Struktur, it was very small and intimate.
Yeah. It
wasn't a big production conference, it really felt like a community.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it's so special.
I wonder why that didn't exist. Like why there weren't a lot of other options for that. I haven't really dug into why that was the case.
I mean, I think one of the reasons it's probably there were some forms, but they were, it's a big money-making machine, and, it's usually owned by big conferences, and, they have certain amount of people they need to attract, and it's just become this, mass thing. Or the other is it's so expensive, so exclusive that you can't really, attend. And what I liked about Struktur is that, a lot of the creatives are freelancers. We're not always, back then I was with the company, so the company paid for my ticket, but, a lot of the freelancers right now, when I look to attend events and whatnot, is just there's a price prohibitive factor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Struktur was still affordable, even if you work for yourself and you didn't have to go through the company.
Right. Making it accessible was the key. So, well, thinking back on that time, and getting to know you over the years as you worked with Icebreaker and moved out on your own, and as I've gotten to interview you and connect with you, I have really been struck with um, the surprises that I'm sure people don't know about you. The entrepreneurship, the tenacity, the creativity, the smarts. I mean, you're incredibly intelligent, both emotionally and really picking up on things in the world. Um, and I think the more I dig into your past, and also, what you're doing now, with trend research, with developing strategies, with how you look at the world and how you connect everything up. Um, like I said, I've been really impressed and inspired by the things that I have been learning more about you over time, and I'm excited about where that's going to take you. And I'm really interested to hear a little bit more also about your background. And we talked about that, and I'd like to have you talk a little bit more about that here. Um, 'Cause, yeah, go ahead.
No, go. I was just
Well, just for a lot of us, we don't. You grew up in Bulgaria, and I would say that most people here don't know a lot about that country, don't know a lot about what was going on there, in general, and so that's interesting in and of itself. But also at the time that you lived there, at the time you were growing up, the things that you were doing and how you made your way here, it's really fascinating. Uh, it's really inspiring. I really just want to dig into that a little bit more because I've heard it when we talked in the last interview. But I'd like to talk about it now in terms of, as we were saying the other day, like the tearing down of old systems and building of new. Because when you're not necessarily going back to, I grew up here and I did this and I went to school and I went and did that, a little bit more about what it was like to grow up at a time of transition from, communism to democracy, a shift of the world, that local world, but also its place in the greater world.
so, I recently started going back to my past because I kind of blocked it up for a very long time. Because somehow I felt that my past did not relate it to my present. But lately I've been thinking a lot about what actually defined me, not just what I do, but like as a person. And I've been digging deeper and going back to my roots. And one of the first thing is that, Bulgaria, actually, for those of you who don't know, it's at the crossroad of East and West. Eastern and Western culture, borders Turkey. And this is just growing up in this culture where the crossroads of East and West always kind of like taught me to look at things from the intersectional approach, of various cultures, of really ancient cultures, of, different ethnic groups and how this all relates to each other. And also how you can bring this, different perspectives. So, these days, like, we all want the quick and easy fix, the quick and easy answer, and kind of we're searching for the black and white, but the reality that, it is that, most issues are not black and white. They're much more complicated, and we have to bring different perspectives and different voice in the conversation. So I grew up during a really interesting time. I was old enough to remember bits of the communism and young enough to like not have that mentality and imprint in my psyche as, some of the, older generations. So I do remember very vividly when the system fell down and, we were going on the streets and till late at night and protesting and, being really excited about democracy. And it was really exciting times. And it was very, it was exciting. It was challenging times. There was, a lot of hope in the air, a lot of anxiety as well, because the future is unknown. But it also was the time of like these very early stages of people really seized the moment and created their own opportunities, because we grew up from most people grew up in a time where you were not, you were conformed to the system. You could not have your own business. You couldn't have a creative freedom of expressions. You couldn't, if you were a man, you couldn't wear longer hair, you couldn't dress all these ways. So it was just this absolute flourishing of like businesses and opportunities. But it also created its own challenges because of these uncertainties. We went to like, growing up like triple digit inflation and a lot of economical turmoil. So what that taught me is like, to see really, to always evolve, always change, and always look for opportunities, even if they don't exist. And, just when I graduated from high school, there was just nothing for me where I could plug in, so, or at least that I wanted to.
Well, what time period was this transition?
So we're talking about, the communist system fell down in 1989. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about that period. I was really young. I was like second grade. But, let's say the period of 1989 to when I started the hostel was 1997. Yeah. I graduated from high school 97, so I started the hostel.
So when you were in second grade, how, or that beginning time period when it started to shift, how aware were you of that shift to democracy at that age? I mean, was it really?
Well, it's really interesting because actually for me, it happened much earlier. Before even the system fell down. Like I had a glimpse through, magazines and catalogs, people bringing Coca-Cola or like chocolates from the Western world. Yeah. And I realized that there's a different way of being. There's a world out there that it's more beautiful. And it just felt to me, there's something bigger and better. Yeah. And this is, the world I live right at this moment, it's not defining me. And I was from very early age, I was determined that I would get out of there. And I had no idea that we're talking about, I was probably kindergarten. That's the time period we're talking. I had no clue what any of these systems or, democracy and communism and things. I just knew there was something bigger and better out there. And I made promise to myself. I actually remember the moment sitting in this bus stop that I will get out of there. Wow.
It's like a pop culture window, like the pop culture getting in, it starts to show something that there's more. It's interesting.
Yeah, and kind of relates back to like I just read your latest Substack article and about the creatives, and you feel like you never fit. And I never felt I come from a very small town. Well, not very small. It's, it's mid-sized town in northern Bulgaria. And I never felt I fit there. I never felt I fit in the town. I later, moved to the capital, went to English high school, and also, it was more cosmopolitan, but I also felt that, I didn't fit there either. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go and experience a totally new way of thinking and new system. And that's where I set my eye on the States, not even going to Europe to study, but, I wanted to go to university in the States because it was a completely different mentality, that can-do mentality. At least from the outside perspective, that's what it felt like. The sky was the limit. You could really become something. And it just really resonated with me. The idea really resonated with me. And that was my goal. I was just fixated on this. Of course, growing in this situation, it was an insane dream because I don't come from money. It was really, it's really expensive to go to university, as we all know in the States.
Yeah.
But when I'm going back and just the power of the mind and the mindset, and, later when, if you talk about, creativity and care, is just how powerful it's our mind. And sometimes we don't know how we're going to get there. But if you continue walking that path, in my case, I consider myself lucky. Things work out for me. But for me, it was never a doubt. For me, it was not either or. There was no other way. I was going to do that. And everyone thought I was, crazy, that I need to come down from the sky and go enroll in university in Bulgaria. And I just absolutely refused. It was all or nothing.
Where do you think that comes from in your life? I mean, I know you talk about growing up at a time of great change, but are there other places, your family, where does that come from for you, that in feeling to do that? Do you have any idea?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where it comes from because
Just always had it.
Yes. Sometimes I don't know exactly whether it comes from some ancestral traits, but sometimes we just come up with our own thing and our own drive. And I don't know where it comes from.
I think
it's a good question.
That's one of those ones that there are certain things that I know that I just was born with, that I don't know where they came from, certain drives to do things. And I've tried to dig into that as well. And I think we all have some piece of that, especially when we have children and people say, oh, they sometimes seem like they come out fully formed. They already are people. They already have, they're not a blank canvas. We're not born, to be molded. We already have things.
We do, and it's also probably a lot has to do with the environment too. Mm-hmm. How it affects it's both, but there's something definitely we're born with. Yeah. But it's also the environment, how it shapes us.
So I want to talk about, you were mentioning going to college in the States, but then we also have talked about the fact that your pathway has been a little bit flip-flopped on its head. So you didn't go to college right from the high school. You did something else.
Yeah. So after I graduated, and I realized, what now? You don't have money. There's no really jobs. Like, what do you do? And when I was 16, I left the country for the first time. I went to Austria on a trip, and we stayed at the hostel, and I thought it was amazing, all these young people. And long story short, I decided to open a hostel in Bulgaria. That was, the first international youth hostel in the capital. Well, it's actually in Bulgaria, and kind of like it came out from this necessity of, you had to figure something out.
There was no other hostel in Bulgaria at that time, or
not a youth hostel, not a hostel for backpackers like we know it. There was something kind of like called little huts and things like that. There were like little rooms you can rent, but that was also the time where foreigners were charged double if they double the rate for Bulgarians, let's say, so to stay in a hotel. So there were not even many hotel options. Right now, there's a lot of everything, but back then there was, pre-internet era. My focus was, backpackers. So that's how the idea was born. And, with the help, obviously, back then, as I said, I don't come from money. We didn't have savings to open something like that. So I found an angel investor, and
how did you
started.
How did you do that? Even that's something today, people, well, how do you find an angel investor? Back then in Bulgaria, how do you even know to do that?
Well, I actually didn't know. That's what you even call them. But I was at this party at the American Embassy, 4th of July party. And that's how I met this woman. She was the doctor of the Peace Corps. She was American. Well, she is still American. We're very good friends to this day. That's how things happen. And of course, back then there was no contract. There was no, nothing official like this. So, it's really interesting. I mean, we also became very good friends. But what's interesting is that I don't know how many years after we opened the hostel, I gave her back the money, the loan. And she told me that when she gave me this money, when she invested in the hostel, she never really thought she would see this money back. So that in itself felt very good because, it was hard. It was one person operation, and trying, didn't know anything about marketing or accounting or any of these fancy business terms. I had no clue what that is, but I knew how to make people welcome and to create this kind of oasis and special place, and to make people feel special. And that's what I ended up in all tourist guides, Lonely Planet and Rough Guides, and then everything after 2-3 years, just the door opened up and flooded. Because back to that point was month to month, like, are we going to survive this month or not? Am I going to have money to pay the rent and the bills or not?
How many years did you run the hostel? Would you say?
2-3 years full time. I think it was 3 years, 2.5. And when I was there full time, I was living there, working there. It was still kind of, month to month, like, are we really gonna pull it out this month?
Yeah.
And when I left, to come to study in the States, I left it to my mom and my best friend. So they were running it, and they actually reaped the benefits of all the work, because at that point, it was featuring all travel guides, and, everything just flooded and opened. The business just flourished. And I would go back every summer during the high season. I would go back there and help and run it. And, from afar, at that point, all the internet called up, booking, stuff like this. So I was helping a lot with marketing. But I think that would fundamentally, without even knowing the theories and stuff, I was doing a lot of things intuitively. So which goes back to the lesson probably I learned, it's sometimes the more tools we have, the more data we have, the more knowledge we have, it could be also crippling. Mm-hmm. And, just kind of don't overthink it. And it also comes from a point when you have nothing to lose, meaning like you had to make this work because, you had to, you had no choice.
The alternatives were worse, and there weren't any.
Well, I mean, they were, but, it's not work I necessarily wanted to do. I didn't want to be a PA. I didn't want to be a waitress. There were, there was not a lot of opportunities. I said, right now it's very different, a totally different world. But again, I said, when I grew up, it wasn't like that. When I was young, but yes, so that was the biggest probably lesson. It's like, don't overthink it and just keep going and wake up. And it was hard, and just, eventually things would hopefully shine up and the doors would open and your hard work will pay off.
Is that what happened to the hostel?
Well, it's closed, because then my mom came to the States, and we closed the business. But at that point, also when we closed the business, there were a lot of hostels opened, and there was a lot of different options. So, I mean, the market had obviously changed quite a lot, but
you were part of that change.
Yes. You
were a big part of that change. Yeah, that's so then from there, you stopped working there to go to university.
Yes, so that was, always my dream, my kind of end goal. And during this time it's interesting because the hostel, even though it got successful and I could have grown up, it eventually grew up. Like we expanded the business. I was thinking maybe, it could have even gone like franchise and become really big.
Yeah.
But to me, I always thought, that came easy. That was not, somehow I didn't translate this as a success back then. Yeah. I always brushed it off. Maybe that's the reason probably I don't even talk about it a lot. But, my end goal was always to go to university in the States. That was my dream. I'm very, very young.
It ends up being a stepping stone.
Yes, it was a totally stepping stone. Absolutely a stepping stone. And yeah, that was, sometimes it's interesting how we get fixated on one thing and things don't work out. And we go a different way. And, when we're in the midst of all of this, we don't see, why things are like this, why it's happening. But then at the end, when you go on the other side, you realize things happen for a reason. And I'm very grateful for that experience.
Well, when you talk about finding yourself at these crossroads, these kind of inflection points, then you also find yourself at, like a crossroads where you have to make a choice. So not just the intersection of, say, East and West or whatnot, but to me that represents choice.
Yes.
It's also loaded with a lot of scary stuff, a lot of fear, a lot of responsibility, because you have to make a choice. It's not being made for you. And that choice to, you could have taken the hostel in this direction and really grown it. Very similar to what could have happened with Struktur event as a conference, had the opportunity to really grow it and chose not to go that direction. So you chose not to go that direction because there was something else that you wanted to explore, something else you wanted to do.
Yeah. And I think that when I went to university, for me, that was not a choice because that was always the end game. For me, after I graduated from university, that was the choice, whether I go back to Bulgaria and grow the business or invest in my life here. And that was the crossroads. And to be honest with you, kind of when I say I did everything in reverse order in my life, I finished university and, I had this, went through, got full scholarships. I was the rising star, even got a scholarship to go and get an MBA, but I had to work first 2 years and graduate valedictorian. And I was going to be this businesswoman, climbing the corporate ladder, and I graduated and I had to pause, and I was at this crossroads. It's like, but what do you really want to do? And I realized that there was a big resistance in me, that I did not want to do that. I did not want to go and work for, big corporation and climb that ladder. And
why is that?
Because after I graduated, as I said, like my dreams was always to go to study in the States, and I fulfilled that dream. I excel in it. And then I finished university, and I realized that my dreams stopped there, and I didn't know what to do next. Yeah. And I was questioning a lot of stuff. Like, I was questioning, lifestyle, and like for the first time, I felt I had a choice. And it was crippling because, again, going back from Bulgaria, I had no choice. We always have a choice, but they were like very, very limited choices. And in the States was the opposite. Like, you had too many choices. Which road do you take? It was almost crippling when you come from no choice.
And when you were coming from Bulgaria, you had already made the choice. You already knew what choice you wanted.
I knew, yes. I knew that.
Yeah. And then when you did it, you hadn't gone further in deciding what.
Yes. Yeah. And just like, what do I do now? What's next? Because I kind of, I thought it's always like what was expected from you, right? You had to be very practical. Again, coming from that background, if you look at what Eastern Europeans study back then, it was all the practical stuff, accounting, economics, doctors, lawyers. Yeah. And I actually studied international business because, in college, everything was so interesting to me that I had a really hard time picking up something I was interested in. Psychology, I was interested in art. History, I was interested in I took economics and I just loved it. So for the first time, you had all these choices. You could be whatever you wanted to be. Mm. And that was a totally new concept for me. Mm-hmm. But at that point, I had no idea there was a whole creative field. And I never thought myself as creative. I thought that creative field, it's only reserved for designers. And I can't draw. Therefore, I'm not creative. And that was it. I never went to explore what other options there are. So I started international business because of the international aspect. You had to study a language. I love languages. I love cultures. I like observing cultures. I like all of this. So, international business was this combo degree, which gave you a taster of all these disciplines. And so I finished university, and I actually had to look myself like, what Tsveti wants to do. And I didn't know. And, I went traveled. For the first time, I did something non-practical. I always wanted to learn Italian. So I went to Italy and I studied Italian for the pure pleasure of it, and kind of like one thing led to the other. And, I had a dear friend of mine, and she was a designer, and she told me, well, there's a whole field out there, creative field, where you don't have to be a designer. And that kind of set me, and I started researching and what I want to do. And, we ended up moving to Portland. And obviously this is the mecca of the outdoor active industry. And I decided that's what I wanted to do.
This episode was brought to you by the Functional Fabric Fair, powered by Performance Days, the premier trade show for performance fabrics and materials. Since 2018, the Functional Fabric Fair has been providing a unique, highly curated trade show experience in the performance materials space, aimed at providing customers with the very best options to create the highest level products in the market. Having a strong focus on education and sustainability, the Functional Fabric Fair is committed to tackling the biggest issues we face today in regards to product manufacturing and our environment. With 5 shows throughout the year from Portland to New York City to Munich, you're sure to find what you need at the Functional Fabric Fair and Performance Days. So how did you get into that conversation with your friend who is the designer? Like, what prompted her to even say that to you about creative fields? Were you talking about that?
Yeah, because at that time, again, I graduated and I was going back to the hostel. I was traveling, but, I just kind of was this crossroads. And she was starting her own swimwear business, actually. It's very successful. It's called Mauritius Swim. But then, that was a time when she was just starting the business and I was trying to figure out what I want to do. And yeah, she was it's like, hey, check out this university. There's like, even degrees like merchandising or business for fashion, because you study business. What if, you use it in the fashion world? And it's like, oh, great. I'm going to go get my master's in Italy and in fashion management. And, I just had these ideas, but, that was 2008 and the economy tanked and that put an end to this dream. And it's like, okay, I'm not in the fashion capital, but, I'm in Portland, Oregon, and this is the outdoor active. So what we can do here.
Had you been interested in fashion before? You were talking about, light magazines, Coca-Cola, kind of having that exposure to some of that pop culture when you were younger.
Never been, never. They didn't even know actually much about fashion. That was something. Again, growing up, we were like the original thrifters. We would go to like secondhand stores not only because it was cheaper, but because it was different. It was not just whatever you had in the store. So
it was
I never considered myself being in the fashion or like, it was not a thing. I was going to be working in the World Bank. I was going to be saving the world. That was my mindset. I went to like,
that humanitarian piece, you talked about that as well, that you have always really been focused on, the humanitarian, like really thinking about people and doing the right thing and doing good things and doing positive things for people. And that you ended up studying international business and moving more in that direction,
Yeah, again, as I said, for me, it was always been really hard to pinpoint exactly what I wanted to study because I'm so curious, naturally super curious, which kind of like actually 2 things happened in college, which set me up. Back then, I didn't realize, but one was, one of my favorite classes was economics for developing. It was called Economics for the Developing World. And I was fascinating with this. Like, oh my God, this is for the first time I felt like you can use business principles to do good and help people. And I was really interested in this field. And the other things which set me to kind of the seeds of what I'm doing right now is one of my professors, in one of my classes, management classes, we had to write a research paper, like we were going to publish it in academic journal. And that was actually my true first research paper, where you had to come with a thesis, which is very original. It's not just a paper, but, you had to present some originality. And I pour all my heart and soul in this project. And, my thesis apparently was very interested for him. It was about radical innovation and total quality management. And he really liked what I did. And he proposed to me, to co-author a paper together and publish it in a journal, and end up getting published in a business journal. That was kind of like one of my final projects in college. And so he really encouraged me to go into research and get my PhD. But, I also knew like I love research, but I love people. I don't see myself as just sitting and researching. I like to interact with people. I like to observe people. I like to study people. I like to be kind of also in the action. But looking back, reflecting on this is kind of like where where some of my research kind of skills started.
Hmm. Well, this is the kind of stuff I love talking about with all creatives, because a lot of us find ourselves in those places of not being able to choose what we want to do. Where should we go? I've always been really envious of people who are, I knew I wanted to be this, and that's what they did, because that was never me either. And being able to study all of these different things and learn about yourself through it, discover that you have a talent and ability for the research and that you could go in this direction, but to know that there were other pieces that you needed, the connecting with people and different. So it leads you down another path, but you take a piece of that path with you every time you go down a path. And then you're forming your own path as you do. And so sometimes we can feel like, oh, I'm jumping from thing to thing and I can't decide what I'm doing. And if I just stuck with something, I'd be able to build on this ladder is often what we're told to do or encouraged to do. And it doesn't work for me. And I can see how that research has worked its way into what you do now and why you're really good at what you do now and what you'll continue to do in the future. But finding your way to do it, how you want to do it.
Yes, and it's really interesting because usually when the things we're really good at, they come, and the things which come easy for us. No matter what you do, if you're accountant or creative or anything. So the things which come easy to us, we tend to, at least I tend to think that, I just brush them off. That's just, that's just something I do.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, it's again, kind of like quieting down and just doing little introspect and looking at, kind of really ask these deep questions, but what do you really want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, because it's not a set path. Like probably up to the hostel, even to the university, I always knew what I wanted, go get it. Like I knew I was going to get it. I knew there was a bigger word. I wanted to get my education. I had a very strong North Star,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I went for it. And after that, things have not been like this for me. They've been more exploratory, more fluid, not very, not such a straight path. It's more like feeling, searching, finding out, being very flexible. But that also comes at a cost. That if you're on this trajectory, like you're moving towards something, you're building upon something, you probably things are more straightforward, mentally and probably financially. And for me, as I said, like I'm always a seeker, always a searcher, always learning, evolving, what's next. And I kind of notice like I do something for a while and then it's time to change and flip the whole thing. And you start, it feels like you start from the beginning, and you don't start from the beginning. As you said, like you build up, one thing leads to another, even though it might not seem related.
It sounds very much like it correlates with the world of trend research, which is never ending. It's always changing. And right when you get to one place, it's already moved on to another, or you've kind of landed where you are right now and evolving. And I want to jump to that piece and how you got from that transition place from getting out of school, finding your career direction, because you also, like, once you did, I mean, I see a theme here of you set your intention on where you want to go and you get there, even when you're not sure and it just keeps going and changing. But you set your intention on where you wanted to work next and you got there and you built your own role. You didn't even know what you would necessarily be doing. And you fell into what you're doing now or what you were doing for them, and you built that role. want to jump to that. Talk a little bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, again, in Portland, I kind of put a list back then, the companies I wanted to work based on just what I've researched. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about the outdoor industry. I like being outside, but I had no idea about the outdoor industry. And the first company on my list, and I found that journal or notebook like years after that, was Icebreaker. And ironically, I ended up working for Icebreaker. Again, very, I had no experience. And I was absolutely, once I read the story, I fell in love with Jeremy Moon's, the founder's story. I felt that his story, how he started the business, was in some way similar to my story. And I could relate to this. And I said, I wanna work for this company. Yes, they have a great product and all that stuff, but for me, it wasn't the product. It was about the story.
How did you know about them to begin with? How did you find them? How did they jump out to you?
It was, the store here, there's still a store. And I really liked, what actually caught my attention was the imagery, the controversial Icebreaker imagery, where, in US was controversial, but in the rest of the world was, very well received. And what made the brand stand out from the sea of sameness, whether you liked it or not, it was a brilliant creative direction.
Yeah.
And so yes, I had no contacts, nothing. My husband was working for King Footwear, and he was like, "Oh, I met someone at Icebreaker. You should talk to her." Mm-hmm. And I talked to her. It's like, "Hey, there's no jobs right now, but call me in 2 months. I might have something." So I started doing projects for them. There was no job like the traditional interview way, which
defined role with a title.
I was just thinking the other day, I've actually never been hired through a traditional process. Mm-hmm. I've never had, at Icebreaker, I was there for almost 9 years. I never submitted a resume or had an interview. Because I realized that, I do better, I shine better through my actions. Like if I can do a project or something versus talking about myself, which is a whole another subject of cultural differences, but that's another thing. So, so I started doing projects for them, and Jeremy Moon, the founder, was there, and he wanted me to organize this leadership summit, really short notice. And I did it, and it went, he was so impressed that it went from there's no job to like, we want to hire you. What do you want to do? And that was the beauty of the company was back at the time, because it was so, it had this entrepreneurship spirit. It was, you could create opportunities and see opportunity where they don't exist and plug in. And, it was very, very organic and felt very natural to me, to kind of what I used to do with the Hostel. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I spliced these two roles together, like half time in product and half time in marketing.
And you had the event was successful because of how you approached creating the environment for everyone, right?
Yes. And it's all about, for me, it's kind of going back to probably the Hostel, the hospitality part of it and the details and making people feel special. But it's especially, for me, it's always been because I used to do a lot of events. I organized all the trade shows, all the sales meetings. That was, part of my job. But it's always a special touch, that special note or that little gift or how you wrap it, and, just make people feel special, and they would recognize and feel that. Mm-hmm. And it's the details, because the big stuff, it's expected everything to go fluid, the check-in and all these things. But it's knowing the culture, knowing kind of going back to like observing, asking questions, what resonates with people, and trying to execute it. And if you don't know how, find the people who are the experts to help you out. I didn't know what was the trendy restaurants and stuff in San Francisco, but I tapped into a network to tell me this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah. And so that's how I started my career at Icebreaker. And all the roles I had there, I created them myself. No one had them before. So when I started with Icebreaker, specifically on the product side, I was going to trade shows. And one of my first trade show was the outdoor retailer. And I saw Janine speak. She was back then with Style Side.
Yeah, this is Janine Pesh.
Yes, Janine Pesh. She's the founder of Range.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience with the trend world. And I was just so fascinated that at this moment, I had no idea what this is, but that was 100% me. It resonated, and I knew right there and then that's what I wanted to do.
I got chills. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you get these goosebumps. I'm a highly sensitive person, but like when you get these goosebumps, even now speaking to it, I get it. It's like kind of these signs. It's like, that's it. So I didn't know anything about this field. I didn't know this was even a job. I mean, even to this day, now it's more popular, but even to this day, it's still so coveted. It's very close-knit community. It's very hard to get in. So I started doing trade show reports. I would walk the floor, take photos, and attend all this conference and summarize everything up in presentation, and would give the presentation to the team. And this presentation, then I'll go to like marketplaces and I do the same. And this presentation got so popular that more and more people from different departments start coming and attending. And back then, I knew there was a really big hunger in the organization for insights and trends, which are kind of tailored to what we do, which can inform not just product, but marketing or other, retail strategy. So there was a big hunger for this because yes, even back then when you subscribe to these big services like WGSN, active outdoor was not even on the map. That was not a topic interesting to them at all. Even active was not even in the game so much. So there was a really big niche for, an appetite for this. So I started doing more and more of this. And I also started doing consumer focus groups and consumer insights, travel around the world doing this. So I combined both of this together. And I knew at this point that I wanted to create this role based on this. And I started pitching the role and entertaining the role, wrote my own job description, and I ended up getting promoted to this. And then, obviously things got involved. Eventually that became even, it got more elevated with the new consumer, oh my God, what do you call them? Chief marketing officers. It became more and more important in the organization. So it left just being a function of product to inform strategy, to inform, strategic planning and decisions. So it was very central, and it was really good to that. I was run at this point with leaders who saw that value and elevated and the role and the voice of this role.
This speaks very much to why you call yourself, a strategist versus just a trend researcher or, trend forecaster. But, that is a big piece of what you do, which is working with companies directly on not just what are the trends out there and what's coming, and but you look at their place in that, their place in the bigger picture and the mark that they can make, and you help them build that strategy, correct?
Yeah, because yes, even the projects I work on right now, or even back with Icebreaker, was very tailored to specific brief, which had to inform this specific strategy and specific outcomes. So it wasn't just the trends; it was, it's kind of tailoring this to what it all means for the industry, but for us as a business or for this creative brief, how you can tackle, because there are different tools in the toolbox. Like, that's another thing. I have a really hard time defining that title, because, everyone wants to put you in a box, and the cleaner, the smaller the box, the easier for everyone to go and pick different boxes. And kind of like I have more tools in my tool set. It's, I don't just do trends insights. There's also kind of like the strategy, the market intelligence piece, the consumer focus groups and consumer research and ethnographic research. I mean, there's just all these different disciplines that are not just based on trend research, scenario planning, foresight. And for the outside person, it may just seem so the same thing, but they're quite different. And usually people specialize in one of these.
And and companies usually, actually, I haven't really worked with a company that has hired, has had a trend, researcher or strategist in them. And so I don't, when companies hire for them, what are they usually looking for? I mean, there may be.
I mean, I see more and more companies. Icebreaker was very unusual at the time because, and even now, because it was a fairly small company, and they invested in someone like me to bring this intelligence into the process. And that was very, kind of ahead of their times. Because now you see it more and more. There's more jobs, and more companies are hiring roles like this. They call them different things, but it's the same stuff. So, sorry, what was the question?
I guess it was more like realizing I didn't know I had a question in there for this, but what are companies looking for when they are hiring for that? Because there may be people who are hiring, say, you for what you do, but if companies are hiring for some sort of trend research strategy, what are they looking for? Are they looking for somebody to do the research and just come and present it? Are they looking for somebody to help with strategy? What do you see the most?
Oh, you mean like full-time hiring, or as a
Maybe, or are they full-time? Are they looking for, what are people looking for? I mean, what are you seeing?
I mean, it depends on the company, but the bigger companies, they have a division of people who do data analysis and market intelligence and, crunch numbers. There's a whole division who only do consumer research. And there's also a division or function which does trends, whether it's product trends, cultural, societal trends. So all get, depending on the size of the company, they could be like totally separate entities. So, there's, again, I'm seeing quite a hunger and demand for insights. In terms of like, as a consultant, what they're hiring is just really depends on the project. If you're working, what's the brief kind of a thing. But I would say the trend I'm seeing right now is, if you're working as a consultant and you're not part of the big trend companies, they don't want just trends, because they can go, there's so many trends, and most of these companies subscribe to trends. So they're over to here with trends. They just want very, trend specific to them, what it means for them, how they can, and what's the glide path? Okay, these are the trends. What does it mean for me? I mean, a very tailored approach. It's almost like, and also they're hiring for your spin and for your mind and for your creativity. And that's ultimately what every trend person or strategist or creative, whatever you want to call it, brings, when they do the research. Maybe the trends are the same, we're all seeing the same stuff, but your spin, your interpretation, and how you deliver it, it's what makes it unique to and differentiates us. But kind of like going back a little bit, it's like in the past was like you were all trying to dig and find the trends, how we can, what's the next big thing. And right now it's almost the opposite. Like how many back then was how many trends I can put in my basket? How can I find more and more and more? Now it's like how there's so much happening in the moment, so much happening that it's actually what you leave out, what you filtered. It's becoming more important. Filter added simplicity, laser sharp focused, because I've seen so many decks and decks and decks of information, and it's just somehow it doesn't relate. And it's also how you deliver. Lately, like my biggest thing has been, how you make people to feel the future, because we've kind of the pendulum in the trend field has gone heavily swayed to data lately, the last years. It was data driven, and data it's important. I'm not saying data is not important, but there's also intuition and feeling. And if you put a lot of numbers on a page, they don't necessarily make you move. Sometimes they probably make you paralyzed, but it's how you make people emotionally connect and with this information so they can act, so they don't feel paralyzed. How can you even feel the future? Because for people, like us, it's very easy to make this connection. It's very easy to see it, but it's so obvious. But again, you have to take people on this journey with you, because not everyone is the same, can see these patterns. So that's like lately I've been super interested in like artifacts, creating artifacts, the imagery, even there's a lot of interesting stuff. And I know, about Jane McGonigal and this, simulation and, bringing probably more voices, more video, more immersive stuff to make you feel the future.
Yeah. You talk about finding the white space. And, I thought about, at first I thought finding the white space, meaning where's the opportunity company. But then as you were just talking, I thought about it also being what you leave out.
Yes. I mean, it's actually a lot of people, when you say find the white space, probably think of like innovation, truly in the sense of innovation. Nothing like this exists on the market before. And it can be that, but oftentimes it's not even that innovative. It's right in front of you, just helping you to uncover it and see it more clearly. And sometimes you also have to realize where it's on the kind of like the innovation curve, how early you're seeing that space. Mm-hmm. So I remember I was working in a project for Icebreaker. I don't know how many years ago now, but we had to reinvent hike and, completely revamp it. There was a new brand direction. It had to match with this new brand direction to reach these new consumers. And it was probably like 6 years ago. I don't remember. But I was looking at the whole space, the whole outdoor active space and hike in particular. And it was all about action, going, doing stuff in nature. Mm-hmm. And no one was talking about the mental aspect of being, outside, about, and even through imagery, not just marketing campaigns, product is product, you can design the product, but like, what's the reason behind it to exist and how it differentiates from the others? Why are you bringing this to the market? Yeah. And it was just really was so clear to see that no one was kind of taking that mindful approach to hike and being outdoor. And that was the white space. Now, was it the right moment for the organization? It was too early. And that's why it's so important when we talk, about the diffusion of innovation curve for, early adopters and late adopters and laggards. It's like sometimes, you're seeing it early and it's the right thing, but, maybe not the right time for the brand. Mm-hmm. Or, again, it goes back to how, is the organization progressive enough or, adventurous enough to invest in this and make such a sharp veer? Because at the end of the day, it's all about, it's about money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And usually that by the time most people see it, the trend, it's probably on the way out when it becomes so obvious. Kind of the same thing happened with activewear and the whole athleisure. And by the time, you decide to act upon it, like everyone has already been doing it,
Yeah. And by the time you can respond to it, in the manufacturing cycles, marketing cycles, all of that, it takes so long to respond. And now it's just, it's been moving so fast. We talked about that. We'll talk more about that in the second portion here, about how things have been speeding up in life and self-care and all. You have been listening to UnStruktured, the podcast from Struktur Society. If you enjoyed this episode, please download, share, like, subscribe, and add your thoughts and suggestions in the comments. Also, please consider a Substack paid subscription to help us bring even more meaningful content and connection points to you and our creator community. Here you will find articles and news, as well as the podcast and additional content. We cannot grow without you. Thanks for listening, and talk to you soon.